Have you heard there are going to be new laws for e-hailing in South Africa? So these rules and laws have been in the news recently, and they affect thousands of drivers who use apps like Uber and Bolt, as well as millions of passengers who rely on them daily. It is a big change because for years e-hailing existed in a grey zone, not properly recognized by the law, and often in the center of conflict with the minibus taxi industry. Initially it used to be maxi taxis or metered taxis, and now it's been e-hailing. Now, government has stepped in with a new law that brings e-hailing directly into the public transport framework, and this is going to affect everyone involved. So what exactly is happening? The National Land Transport Act has been amended. That means it is now official law, not just for talk, but like for real. For the first time, the government is saying that e-hailing services are part of the public transport system, just like taxis and buses. This is important because it sets clear rules about who can operate, where they can operate, and under what conditions. The first big change is that every driver now needs to have a proper operating license. In the past, many drivers were working with only a car and an app account like an Uber app or a Bolt app. Now, if you want to drive passengers through Uber, Bolt, or any other e-hailing services, you have to apply for a specific license. That license will say exactly which areas you're allowed to operate in. If your license says Johannesburg, you cannot just go pick up passengers in Rasti or Limpopo. You have to stick to your authorized area. This is one way government is trying to reduce fights with the taxi industry, because taxis have always worked within defined routes and territories. The second big change is that cars must now be branded or carry visible signs that show they are e-hailing vehicles. Up to now, most e-hailing cars look like normal private cars, which was convenient but also created risks. It was hard for passengers to know if a car was really from the app or if someone was pretending. It was also hard for law enforcement to identify who was working illegally. With branding and signage, it will be obvious which cars are e-hailing cars. The third important rule is around safety. Every car must now have a panic button installed, and that is a major step. South Africa has had many reports of violence against both passengers and drivers in the e-hailing industry. With the panic button, passengers and drivers will have a quick way to call for help in dangerous situations. On top of this, every driver must have a professional driving permit, must undergo background checks, and must provide proper photo identification. These requirements are designed to improve trust and safety for riders. Okay, now, why has the government decided to do this now? The main reason is conflict. For years, there have been violent clashes between e-hailing drivers and the minibus taxi industry. Taxi operators have seen e-hailing as unfair competition because taxis had to follow strict rules while e-hailing cars were seen as working freely without the same burden. Passengers have also complained about safety issues, from being attacked to being overcharged by illegal operators. The new rules are meant to create a level playing field and to bring more order into the industry. But what does this mean in practice for drivers? For drivers, it means more steps and more costs. You cannot just buy a car and sign up on the app anymore. You need to apply for your operating license and make sure your car is branded, or at least it has signage. You need to install a panic button and stick to your operating area. You also need to keep your documents up to date, such as your professional driving permit and police clearance. All of this will take time and money, but for many drivers it will not be easy. And for many drivers it won't be easy. For passengers, the changes are both good and bad. On the good side, it will now be easier to identify real e-hailing cars, and you will know that your driver has gone through checks and training. The panic button adds an extra layer of safety. On the downside, costs could rise. If drivers have to spend more money to comply, then they might actually push those costs onto riders through higher fares. There also may be fewer drivers on the road if some cannot meet the requirements quickly, which could then make waiting times a bit longer. So obviously we can't talk about this without talking about the challenges. South Africa has a history of delays and backlogs in issuing licenses. We have seen this with taxis before. If provincial authorities are slow in processing applications, many drivers could find themselves stuck, unable to work legally, even though they are willing to comply. That could lead to frustration and even more tension. Another issue is that rules may be enforced unevenly. And speaking of this, recently a lot of taxis have been impounded and put off the road permanently, and that's why there was a bit of a fight between the taxi industries and the police who were impounding these vehicles. So in some cities, law enforcement may be strict, while in others, drivers may still get away with operating without licenses. That could create confusion and unfairness. Critics of the new law say it could actually make life harder for small operators. Bigger companies and drivers with resources will find it easier to pay for branding, for panic buttons, and sorting out licenses. But for someone who is just trying to earn a living with their own car, the costs may be way too high. But there's also a concern that e-hailing is now being treated more harshly than the taxi industry, which has long been allowed to operate even when many of its drivers do not follow the rules. So I think that little clampdown that was going down was just to set the tone with the whole Uber industry thing. So in conclusion, these new regulations are a major turning point for the transport industry in South Africa. E-hailing is no longer in the shadows. It is officially recognized as a transport system. If the system is implemented fairly and efficiently, it could improve safety for passengers, bring more order to the sector, and reduce conflict with the taxi industry. But the success of the law will depend on how it is applied in real life. If licenses are delayed, if enforcement is uneven, or if costs are too high, then problems will continue. For now, drivers should start preparing to meet the requirements, and passengers should expect visible changes in how e-hailing looks and operates. Now, this is the start of a new chapter in how South Africans move around their cities. As I always say, knowledge is a powerful weapon. Arm yourselves, and thanks for watching.